Welcome to the deep dive. You sent us Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, which is, well, it's a really fascinating look at the two systems driving our minds.
Really is.
So our mission here in this deep dive is to kind of unpack the key ideas about these systems and, how they actually affect your daily life. You might find some surprising things about why you think the way you do.
Absolutely. It's more than just armchair psychology. It's really about understanding your own mental gears, so to speak.
Yeah.
Kahneman gives us this great framework for seeing both our intuitive flashes and also where we tend to, well, predictably mess up.
Okay, let's dive right in then. The core idea, system one and system two.
Right.
System one is, think of it as that super fast gut reaction part. It's pretty much running on autopilot.
And system two, that's the slower one, the deliberate thinker, the one you engage when you really need to focus and figure something out.
Exactly. You see system one constantly. Like, imagine seeing someone who looks angry. You don't think about it, you just know instantly. That's system one. Quick, automatic, no conscious effort.
Right. Now, contrast that with, say, trying to multiply 17 by 24 in your head.
Okay, yeah, that's different.
You can do it, but you have to concentrate, right? That's system two kicking in. Kahneman even points out something cool. Your pupils might actually get wider when you're doing that kind of hard mental work.
Wow.
Yeah, it shows the physical effort involved. And the real insight is that these two things, recognizing anger and doing math, feel so different because they are fundamentally different processes in the brain.
So system one is kind of the background operator. It's always on, handling things automatically, effortlessly.
Yeah, things like judging distance, knowing that chair is closer than the door.
Or like turning your head when you hear a loud noise.
Or completing common phrases,
Mm.
like peanut butter and...
Jelly. See. Automatic.
Exactly. It even handles those quick judgments, those stereotypes, like seeing someone neat and quiet and thinking librarian. That's system one jumping to a conclusion.
Okay, so then system two is for the heavy lifting.
Pretty much. It allocates attention. Deliberately. Think about bracing yourself before you start a race.
Or trying really hard to follow one conversation in a super noisy room.
Yes. Or checking the logic of a complex argument. These all require system two. It's tied to our feeling of, choosing, concentrating, exerting mental effort. Our sense of agency really lives there.
So how do they work together? Is it like a tag team?
Sort of.
Yeah.
System one is constantly throwing out suggestions, impressions, intuitions, feelings.
Okay.
And system two is like the editor. It can endorse those suggestions, modify them, or just reject them outright if it takes the effort to check. It usually gets called in when system one runs into trouble or gets surprised by something.
It sounds pretty efficient, actually.
It generally is. System one handles the routine stuff brilliantly, which saves a ton of mental energy. But, and this is crucial, system one's also where the biases live, those predictable thinking errors.
Ah.
And you can't just turn it off. It's always offering its 2 cents, sometimes flawed sense.
Right. Is there a way to see them clash?
Definitely. Think about the Stroop test effect. You see the word BLUE, but it's printed in red ink.
Oh, yeah, that's hard.
If you're asked to say the color of the ink, not read the word, you hesitate, right?
Totally. You want to say blue.
Exactly. Your automatic system one screams BLUE because reading is automatic. But your system two has to step in, override that impulse, and say red. It takes effort, self-control. It shows that conflict perfectly.
Okay, that makes sense. And this connects to cognitive illusions.
Precisely. Take the Miller-Lyer illusion, those lines with the arrows pointing in or out.
The ones that look different lengths?
Yeah, even when you know they're identical, maybe you even measured them, your system one still sees one as longer. The feeling persists.
So even knowing the truth doesn't fix the feeling.
Right. That's the power of the illusion. Our gut feeling, our system one perception can be totally wrong, and system two, knowing the facts, doesn't necessarily change the raw perception.
And Kahneman says this happens with our thinking too, not just vision.
Yes, cognitive illusions. He tells a story about a psychotherapy teacher warning students not to be overly charmed by patients who seem engaging, but have a long history of failed treatments.
Ah, because that charm is like the visual illusion.
Exactly. That immediate positive feeling from system one can be misleading, a cognitive illusion that sways your more rational system two judgment.
And these are hard to avoid then.
They really are. Because system one is automatic and system two, well, it takes effort, it has limited capacity, it can't check everything.
So what's the takeaway? Just give up.
No, not at all. The point isn't to try and eliminate system one. That's impossible, and it's often incredibly useful. The goal is more about recognizing the situations where mistakes are likely.
Learning the warning signs.
Exactly. And then consciously engaging system 2 to double-check things.
And just to be clear, these systems aren't like actual separate boxes in the brain, right?
No, Kahneman is very clear in that. They're useful fictions, nicknames, metaphors to help us talk about these different ways our minds work.
Got it. Okay, so moving on. Part 2 gets into attention and effort.
Right. He uses these tasks, like add 1. You hear digits read out, say, 1 per second, and you have to keep adding 1 to each digit in your head.
Sounds simple, but probably gets tricky fast.
It does. And then there's add 3, which is even harder. These tasks really push your cognitive limits.
And he connects this to pupil dilation.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. He talks about earlier work by Eckhard Hess, who noticed pupils getting bigger with mental effort. Kahneman's lab actually measured this very precisely while people did those add tasks.
What did they find?
A really clear link. The harder the task, the wider the pupils dilated. They'd peak when the person was working their absolute hardest, and then shrink back down when the task ended, or if they just gave up.
Wow, like a physical meter for mental effort.
Kind of, yeah. They even saw this sort of inverted V pattern in the effort. It gives us this visible physiological marker of how much mental energy we're burning.
He tells a story about just watching someone's eyes during a normal chat, right?
Yeah, just casual conversation. The pupils stayed pretty small. It really highlights how little effort everyday chat takes compared to something like add 3. Our mental lives definitely have different speeds, different levels of exertion.
But that intense focus, it has a downside.
It does. Inattentional blindness. Remember the famous invisible gorilla video?
Where people miss a guy in a gorilla suit walking through because they're counting basketball passes.
Exactly. Kahneman found the same thing in their add 1 studies. When people were at peak mental effort, focusing hard on the numbers, they often completely missed letters flashing right in front of their eyes.
So focus on one thing means you can miss something else completely obvious.
Right. System 2 has a limited budget of attention. When it's overloaded, it prioritizes. It protects the main task, but other stuff can just disappear from awareness.
It's like a mental spotlight beam.
A good way to put it. And Kahneman also brings up the law of least effort. We're cognitive misers, basically.
We try to avoid hard thinking if we can.
Yep. Just like we avoid unnecessary physical exertion, we tend to gravitate towards the path of least mental resistance. He ranks tasks by effort. Simply holding digits is easy. Mental multiplication is harder. Add 3 is really tough. We naturally shy away from the harder stuff unless we have to do it.
What makes some tasks so much harder?
Often it's about holding multiple things in mind at once, especially if you need to apply different rules or combine information in specific ways. That's really System 2's territory.
Following rules, comparing options.
Making deliberate choices, yes. System 1 is great at simple connections, like relating bananas and vomit, or integrating different features of one thing, but it struggles with handling multiple distinct topics simultaneously, or dealing with purely statistical information. Think back to that librarian stereotype. It's a quick association, not a statistical calculation.
Okay, and System 2 has task sets.
Right, this is crucial. It's the ability to program ourselves to follow instructions that go against our automatic habits. Like if I asked you to count every instance of the letter F on a page.
That would take deliberate effort. You wouldn't do it automatically.
Exactly. That's executive control. It involves specific brain areas, mainly in the prefrontal cortex, and it's key for managing conflicts between impulses and goals. It's closely linked to general intelligence.
And just switching between these mental gears takes effort, too.
Yes, that's a big part of why tasks like add 3 or complex mental math are so draining. You're constantly shifting your focus, holding results, applying rules. It taxes your working memory and attention control.
Which relates to intelligence and job performance?
Strong correlation, yeah.
Yeah.
People who are better at controlling their attention and managing working memory tend to perform better in demanding professions.
And time pressure makes it worse.
Definitely. Trying to do something complex quickly adds another layer of strain, partly because you're also fighting against memory decay. You have to work faster just to keep everything in mind.
But he also says this kind of intense effort, like add 3, isn't typical daily life.
Thankfully, no. Most of the time, we intuitively break down complex tasks into smaller steps, or we use tools, notebooks, calculators, computers, external memory aids, basically. We naturally try to avoid that feeling of cognitive overload.
Which brings us nicely to part 3, the lazy controller. System 2 might be powerful, but it's reluctant.
You could say that. Kahneman argues System 2 has a preferred cruising speed. And it doesn't like to exert more effort than it feels is necessary. It's fundamentally a bit lazy.
He uses a walking analogy.
Right. Strolling comfortably allows your mind to wander and think freely. But if you try to walk much faster, you have to focus more on the walking itself, and complex thinking becomes harder. Maintaining deliberate thought requires self-control, which itself takes effort.
Unless you're in flow.
Ah, yes. Csikszentmihalyi's concept. That state of deep, effortless absorption where you're so engaged, the challenge perfectly matches your skills, and you don't feel like you're exerting self-control at all. System 2 is fully engaged, but it doesn't feel like effort.
But what happens when System 2 is taxed? When it's busy or tired?
That's when things get interesting. Kahneman calls it a busy and depleted System 2. Research shows that when your cognitive resources are low, maybe you're holding a complex sequence of numbers in mind.
Like in one of those experiments.
Exactly. You're much more likely to give in to temptation, like choosing chocolate cake over fruit salad.
Huh. Okay.
It goes beyond food, though. Cognitive load also correlates with being more selfish, using more conventional or even sexist language, and making more superficial judgments in social situations.
So when System 2 is busy, System 1's impulses have more sway.
That seems to be the idea. This ties into ego depletion, a concept from Roy Baumeister's work.
What's that exactly?
It's the finding that exerting self-control on one task seems to drain a limited resource, making it harder to exert self-control on a subsequent, unrelated task.
So if I resist eating cookies,
You might find it harder to persist on a difficult puzzle afterwards. Or if you force yourself to suppress emotions during a sad movie, your physical stamina might decrease slightly right after.
wow, so self-control is like a general energy pool.
That's the model. Kahneman lists things it depleted: inhibiting thoughts, faking emotions, making difficult choices, trying to impress others, even just responding politely to someone being unpresent.
And the signs of being depleted.
Things like deviating from your diet, impulse buying, reacting more aggressively, giving up faster on hard tasks, performing worse on cognitive tests.
Is it just being busy or something else?
It seems distinct from just cognitive busyness. Ego depletion is also linked to a loss of motivation, although sometimes a strong enough incentive can overcome the effects.
And there's a weird glucose connection.
Yeah, this was surprising. Some studies suggest that mental effort, especially involving self-control, literally consumes blood glucose. And get this, giving people a sugary drink can sometimes counteract the effects of ego depletion.
Seriously, mental energy is partly sugar power.
It's a controversial finding, but the evidence Kahneman presents is intriguing. It certainly makes the idea of mental energy feel more concrete.
That Israeli judges study fits here too, doesn't it?
Perfectly. The parole judges, their likelihood of granting parole, the more effortful, complex decision, was highest right after a food break.
And then it drops steadily until the next break.
Yeah, before a break, when they were likely tired and hungry, depleted, they defaulted more often to the easier, standard decision: denial. It's a stark, real-world example.
So System 2 is supposed to be monitoring System 1, but it often slacks off, especially when tired.
Exactly. It's the lazy controller. And this explains why we fall for simple traps, like the famous bat and ball puzzle.
Ah, the $1.10 one. Bat costs $1 more than the ball.
How much is the ball? The intuitive answer that leaps out is 10 cents.
Right, but that's wrong.
It's wrong. The correct answer is 5 cents. But the key insight is that many people, even very smart people, give the intuitive 10-cent answer. Why? Because their System 2 didn't bother to check the math.
They followed the law of least effort.
Ardently. Kahneman notes that even a high percentage of students at elite universities get it wrong, suggesting overconfidence in their intuition and an aversion to expending mental effort.
He has other examples too, right? Like logic problems.
Yeah, like a syllogism.
Yeah.
All roses are flowers. Some flowers fade quickly, therefore some roses fade quickly.
Sounds plausible.
It sounds plausible, but it's logically invalid. Yet many people endorse it because the conclusion feels right. Again, System 2 fails to engage and check the actual logic.
And the Michigan murders question.
Right. Asking people to estimate murders in Michigan versus murders in Detroit, people often give a lower number for Michigan, which is impossible because Detroit is in Michigan.
Why does that happen?
Because Detroit and its association with crime aren't immediately brought to mind by the word Michigan. That knowledge isn't easily accessible, and System 2 doesn't make the effort to search for it unless prompted. It's another example of insufficient motivation, what Kahneman calls intellectual sloth.
So avoiding these errors means being more engaged.
Yes, more alert, more intellectually active, more willing to question your own intuitions, to be skeptical. Stanovich calls this being rational.
does this relate to intelligence?
It's related, but distinct. Kahneman discusses the marshmallow test. Kids who delayed gratification showed better executive control and higher IQ scores later, and training attention in kids seems to boost intelligence.
So attention control is key.
Very key. And Shane Frederick's cognitive reflection test, the CRT, which includes the bat and ball problem, seems to be a good measure of this tendency toward lazy thinking.
People who score low on the CRT
Tend to be more impulsive, impatient, prefer immediate rewards. They rely more heavily on System 1 intuitions without System 2 supervision.
It's like different personalities for the two systems.
Almost, yeah. System 1 is impulsive and intuitive. System 2 is reasoned and cautious, but also lazy. And we differ in how much we lean on each. The CRT flags that lazy System 2 tendency.
And then there's Stanovich's idea within System 2.
Right. Keith Stanovich distinguishes the algorithmic mind, raw processing power, what IQ tests measure from the reflective mind.
Which is rationality, avoiding laziness.
Exactly. His point is crucial. Being highly intelligent doesn't automatically make you rational or immune to biases. The bat and ball question, he argues, tells you more about susceptibility to cognitive errors than an IQ score does.
Fascinating. Okay, part 4, the associative machine. This is about how System 1 connects things.
Yes, how ideas trigger other ideas in this vast network. Kahneman kicks it off with a simple, powerful example. Think about 2 words, bananas and vomit.
Okay.
See, instantly, your mind probably created a little story, maybe a feeling of mild disgust, a temporary aversion to bananas. It happened automatically, uncontrollably.
Yeah, it did. I kind of assumed the bananas caused the vomiting.
That's associative activation. One idea triggers related ideas, cognitive, emotional, even physical responses in a cascade, creating what he calls an associatively coherent pattern. System 1 does this constantly, making sense of the world.
It builds stories.
Instantly. Links events causally, assesses threats, prepares you for what might come next. It's remarkable. And kind of weird how it treats just reading 2 words like a real event. This links to embodied cognition, to how our physical states influence thoughts.
Philosophers talked about association, right?
Sure, Hume and others talked about resemblance, contiguity, causality. But the modern view sees it as this massive network where activation spreads, mostly unconsciously. We only see the tip of the iceberg.
And priming is key here.
Huge breakthrough. Priming is simply when exposure to one stimulus influences your response to a later stimulus without conscious intention. Like seeing the word eat makes you slightly faster to recognize the word SOUP.
Just related words.
It started there, but the big discovery was that priming goes way beyond words. It can influence actions and emotions, totally outside of awareness.
The Florida effect.
The classic example. Students unscrambled sentences with words related to old age like Florida, wrinkle, forgetful. Afterwards, they were timed walking down a hall, and they walked significantly slower than a control group.
Without realizing it.
Completely unaware. Their idea of old age primed the physical action associated with it. That's the ID motor effect.
And it works the other way, too. Actions priming thoughts.
Yes, it's reciprocal. If you're made to walk slowly, it can prime thoughts related to old age. Smiling, even artificially like holding a pencil in your mouth the right way, can make you find cartoons funnier. Nodding your head while reading makes you agree more.
So act calm and kind is actually good advice.
It might actually help you feel calmer and kinder because of this feedback loop.
And these primes can guide our choices.
Definitely. Seemingly irrelevant stuff, like that study showing people were more likely to vote for school funding if the polling station was located in a school.
Wow. Context matters more than we think.
A lot more. He spends time on money primes, which is quite striking. Just being subtly reminded of money seems to make people more individualistic.
How so?
They become more self-reliant, less likely to ask for help, but also less willing to help others. They even prefer more physical distance from people. Given how money-focused our culture is, it makes you wonder.
Yeah, really. Any other examples?
Lots. Reminders of mortality can increase the appeal of authoritarian ideas. Feelings of shame can prime a desire for cleansing, the Lady Macbeth effect.
Like wanting to wash your hands after lying?
Or even more specifically, an experiment found people who lied over the phone later preferred mouthwash, while those who lied via email preferred soap. The priming can be very specific to the tainted body part.
It sounds almost unbelievable.
Kahneman acknowledges that. People often have trouble accepting these findings because we don't feel these influences. We feel like we're in conscious control.
But the effects are real.
The research suggests they are robust, and they happen to all of us via System 1, beneath conscious awareness.
That honesty box example is pretty convincing.
Isn't it? In a university office kitchen, people paid for coffee using an honesty box. Some weeks there was a poster with pictures of flowers above it, other weeks a poster with human eyes.
And the eyes made a difference.
A huge difference. People paid nearly 3 times as much when the eyes were watching. Just that symbolic reminder of being observed drastically changed behavior unconsciously.
Okay, last part, part 5, cognitive ease. What's that about?
Think of it like a gauge on your mental dashboard. It ranges from easy to strained. It's System 1's assessment of how things are going. Are there threats? Is major effort needed? Should System 2 be mobilized?
And lots of things affect this stage.
Right. Things feel easy if the display is clear, if you've seen it before, repetition, if you've been primed for it, if you're in a good mood.
And strained.
That comes from things like bad font, complex instructions, being in a bad mood, or even frowning. The causes are diverse, but the feeling of ease or strain has predictable effects.
Like what? What happens when things feel easy?
You tend to feel good, you like what you see, you believe what you hear, you trust your intuitions, things feel familiar, and your thinking tends to be more casual, more superficial. System 2 isn't kicking in as much.
And cognitive strain.
That puts you on alert. You become more vigilant, suspicious, analytical. You invest more effort, you make fewer errors, but you also feel less comfortable, less intuitive, maybe less creative.
This ease explains illusions of remembering.
Exactly. Remember that experiment with made-up names. People read a list of fake names. Later, they see another list with some old fake names, some new fake names, and some actual minor celebrities.
And the old fake names feel familiar.
Yes. They feel familiar simply because they've been seen before. This familiarity, this cognitive ease, gets misinterpreted as fame, the becoming famous overnight effect. Familiarity creates this false sense of pastness.
How does ease cause that feeling?
Because words you see before are literally easier to see the second time. They appear slightly clearer, you read them faster. That fluency, that ease of processing, is what generates the feeling of familiarity.
So you can fake familiarity just by making something easier to see.
Pretty much. If you subtly prime a word first, or just display it more clearly, it will feel more familiar than a word that hasn't been primed or is harder to read.
And this also creates illusions of truth.
Big time. Statements that feel familiar or easy to process are more likely to be judged as true, even if they're not. If something is repeated often enough,
You start to believe it.
familiarity breeds belief because cognitive ease feels like truth. System 1 doesn't easily distinguish between the feeling of ease that comes from repetition and the feeling that might come from actual truth. Even repeating just part of a false statement can make the whole thing seem more credible later.
So how do you write a persuasive message, according to this?
Maximize cognitive ease. Use clear, legible fonts, high contrast. Simple language avoids showing off with big words, as that actually creates strain and reduces credibility.
Make it memorable.
Yes, rhymes help. Things that rhyme feel truer. And even choose sources with names that are easy to pronounce. Anything that makes processing smoother helps.
Produce friction.
Exactly. Of course, this only goes so far. If the message is obviously nonsense or contradicts known facts, ease won't save it. But for things where people aren't sure, ease biases belief.
So the core idea is we're often guided by these feelings from System 1, like ease or familiarity, without really knowing why we feel that way.
Precisely. And because that ease can come from things totally unrelated to truth or actual past experience, we're susceptible to these illusions.
Okay, so wrapping this deep dive up, thinking fast and slow really shows this constant dance between System 1 and System 2.
Absolutely. That fast, intuitive, automatic system and the slow, deliberate, effortful one. They're always interacting, shaping our thoughts, our judgments, our choices.
And we've seen how pervasive these cognitive biases are. Things like priming, cognitive ease, they're influencing us constantly, often totally under the radar.
Yeah, operating outside our conscious awareness.
But understanding this, it does give you something, doesn't it? Even if you can't eliminate the biases entirely.
It really does. It gives you awareness. Recognizing situations where System 1 might be leading you astray or where that feeling of ease might be misleading, it allows you to consciously engage System 2 more often, to be more reflective.
It's about becoming a more mindful thinker.
Exactly. Maybe not achieving perfect rationality, that might be too much to ask,
Yeah.
but definitely becoming more aware of how your own mind works and where its pitfalls lie.
So maybe a final thought for you to consider based on all this. Given how much of our thinking is on autopilot, influenced by these subtle factors, What small changes could you make in your own environment, your routines, maybe even just the way you frame things to yourself that might nudge your judgments and decisions in unexpected, perhaps better directions?
That's a great question to ponder. How can you use this knowledge proactively in your own life?
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Thanks for listening. Visit our library and subscribe below for more book summaries. This has been a Sprint Reads production.